She thought his worn jacket meant he was nobody. She thought her father's money made her untouchable. But when Madison Hart saw her black teacher's face staring back from the Forbes 30 Under 30 cover in her father's office, the laughter died in her throat. Some lessons aren't taught from textbooks. They're carved into your soul by the people you underestimated. The laughter started with Madison Hart. It always did. She held the coffee cup between two fingers like it carried disease, dangling it in the air while her phone captured every second. "Did you get this from Goodwill, Mr. Cole? Or was it the clearance bin at the dollar store?" Her voice carried across the economics classroom, sharp and confident, designed for an audience. 23 students watched. Some laughed. Others looked away. A few pulled out their phones. Terence Cole stood at the whiteboard, chalk dust ghosting his fingertips mid-equation. He was 28, but looked younger in the fluorescent light. Dark skin, close-cropped hair, wearing one of his 3 rotation shirts, a blue button-down with a small frayed spot on the collar that Madison had noticed weeks ago. He turned slowly, meeting her eyes with something she didn't recognize, not anger, not embarrassment, patience, the kind that's watched mountains erode and empires crumble into dust. "Miss Hart," he said quietly, "we were discussing marginal utility theory. And I'm discussing your marginal fashion sense." She grinned at her audience. Tyler Chen snorted. Emma Rodriguez covered her mouth. Jordan Bennett filmed from the back row. Terence set the chalk down with deliberate care. He looked at Madison, really looked, and she felt something shift in the air, something she couldn't name. Like standing at the edge of a cliff she didn't know was there. "Some things," he said softly, "have value you can't see yet." Madison's smile widened. "Then you must be very valuable, Mr. Cole." The room exploded with laughter. But Terence just returned to the board, finishing his equation in silence, while Madison's phone uploaded the video to 3 different platforms. She didn't notice that he never looked back. Ashford Academy sat on 12 acres of manicured green, where old money sent its children to maintain bloodlines, and new money sent its children to forge them. The main building was granite and glass, columns flanking the entrance like sentries guarding exclusivity. Tuition ran $60,000 a year. The parking lot glittered with BMWs and Mercedes. 17-year-olds driving cars worth more than most families earned. Madison Hart had never questioned her place here. She was a senior. 17. Blonde hair that caught light like expensive jewelry, blue eyes that assessed everything for weakness. Her father was Malcolm Hart, real estate mogul, city council influence, the kind of man who bought buildings the way others bought coffee. She wore it like armor, designer clothes, perfect makeup, the casual cruelty of someone who'd never needed anything she couldn't have. She ruled the school through proximity to power. When she spoke, others listened. When she laughed, they echoed it. Her friends orbited her carefully. Emma Rodriguez, dark-haired and anxious, whose father was a surgeon. Tyler Chen, whose tech entrepreneur mother donated wings to hospitals. Jordan Bennett, trust fund kid who filmed everything, archiving their privilege like it was documentary gold. They sat together at lunch in the senior courtyard, under trees older than their grandparents, eating catered meals and complaining about teachers who demanded too much from students who'd already inherited everything. Mr. Cole was a favorite target. He'd started teaching at Ashford last year, economics and personal finance appearing one August morning like a question mark in their carefully answered world. He took the bus. They'd seen him at the stop 2 blocks away, messenger bag slung over his shoulder, wearing clothes that didn't match the marble hallways he walked through. He drove no car, wore no watch, brought lunch in containers from home. The students whispered about him constantly. Where did he live? How much did teachers even make? Why would someone work here if they clearly couldn't afford to be here? Madison collected these observations like evidence. She watched him carefully, the way he moved through the building with quiet confidence, How he spoke to the janitors with the same respect he gave the principal. How his lessons were brilliant, even though his shoes were scuffed. It bothered her, that contradiction. Success was supposed to be visible. Her father had taught her that. You wore your worth. You displayed your victories. Mr. Cole displayed nothing, and somehow that made him dangerous. The morning after the coffee cup incident, Madison walked into school feeling victorious. Her phone showed 3,000 views overnight. Comments poured in from other private school kids, from strangers who loved watching privilege flex its muscles. She saw Mr. Cole in the hallway near the administrative office, talking with Mrs. Chen, the principal. They spoke in low tones, his expression serious. Mrs. Chen nodded at something he said, touched his arm with obvious respect. Madison frowned. Teachers usually looked diminished next to the principal. Mr. Cole stood like an equal. Emma appeared at her elbow. Did you see the comments? Someone tagged the school's official account. Good, Madison said, but something flickered in her chest. Not quite guilt, not quite fear. Something unnamed. The first period bell rang through Ashford's hallways like a church chime, summoning them all to class. Economics class began at 10:15 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday today's lesson, Wealth Inequality and the American Dream. Terence stood at the front of the classroom, marker in hand, writing statistics on the whiteboard with steady precision. The top 1% controls 42% of the nation's wealth. The bottom 50% controls 2%. What does this tell us about opportunity structure? Silence. The kind students deployed when they didn't want to engage. Madison sat third row center, her usual throne. She'd rewatched her video during breakfast, the views climbing past 5,000. Tyler had shared it. Jordan had made a meme. Even students from other schools were commenting now, laughing at the teacher who couldn't afford decent clothes trying to teach about wealth. She felt powerful. Seen. Correct. Terence continued, undeterred by their silence. Consider this. A child born in the lowest income quintile has a 7% chance of reaching the highest quintile in their lifetime. 7%. What systemic factors contribute to this mobility ceiling? He turned, scanning the room. His eyes landed on Madison, held there. Miss Hart, your thoughts? She felt the class shift attention to her. Phone cameras lifted subtly. This was content. Drama. The ecosystem of their digital world feeding on confrontation. Madison leaned back in her chair, projecting boredom. I think people end up where they deserve to be. If you work hard enough, you succeed. That's literally America. Interesting. Terence's voice remained level. And what about starting position? Access to capital? Generational wealth? Do those factor into your analysis? Excuses, Madison said, warming up. My dad started with nothing. Built his empire from the ground up. Nobody handed him anything. Several students nodded. Their parents told similar stories, conveniently editing out family loans and inherited connections. Terence wrote something on the board. Meritocracy versus structural reality. He underlined it twice. Here's a question for everyone, he said, turning back to face them. If success is purely meritocratic, if everyone truly has equal opportunity, why do we see such persistent correlation between race, zip code, and economic outcomes? Why does the zip code you're born into predict your life expectancy, college attendance, and earning potential? The room shifted uncomfortably. These were questions that made privilege visible, made it something to defend rather than simply inhabit. Madison felt her jaw tighten. He was challenging her, in front of everyone, making her look ignorant. She raised her hand, didn't wait to be called on. Mr. Cole, I have a question, he nodded. Go ahead. How can someone who can't afford decent clothes teach us about success? Her voice cut clean through the room. Like, no offense, but you take the bus. You wear the same 3 outfits. You're literally the opposite of successful. So why should we listen to you about wealth and opportunity? The classroom went dead silent. It wasn't the playful mockery from before. This was direct, public, cruel in a way that couldn't be laughed off. Phones rose. Record lights blinked red. Terence stood completely still, marker hovering over the whiteboard equation he'd been writing. For 3 seconds he said nothing. Just looked at her with those patient eyes that seemed to see through walls. Then he spoke, voice quiet but clear. "Success isn't always visible, Miss Hart." Madison laughed. Sharp, bright, performed. "Then you must be very successful, Mr. Cole." The room erupted. Laughter bounced off walls. Students exchanged glances, shock mixed with excitement. This was viral content. This was the stuff that lived forever online. Tyler actually applauded. Emma looked uncomfortable, but didn't speak up. Jordan's phone captured every angle. Terence set the marker down, carefully in the tray beneath the whiteboard. He turned back to the board, adding one more line to the equation, his handwriting steady despite the chaos behind him. "We'll continue this discussion Wednesday," he said quietly. "Class dismissed early. Use the time to reflect on what you consider valuable." Students packed up quickly, energized, already uploading content. Madison left feeling triumphant, surrounded by her friends, their validation wrapping around her like applause. She didn't look back at Mr. Cole, still standing at the board, staring at the equation about wealth distribution he'd never finished explaining. She didn't see the way his hands stayed completely steady, or notice the small, sad smile that crossed his face, like he'd seen this movie before and already knew the ending. The classroom emptied in 90 seconds. Terence Cole stood alone in the silence that followed chaos, staring at the whiteboard where his lesson had been interrupted. The equation hung unfinished, a half-formed thought about capital accumulation that felt suddenly, painfully metaphorical. He set the marker down, pressed his palms flat against the desk. Outside the windows, students crossed the courtyard in clusters, heads bent over phones, sharing the moment that would define him in their eyes. He could imagine the captions, the comments, the way digital cruelty multiplied itself endlessly, each share an echo of the original wound, but he'd been here before. Different school, different coast, different variation of the same lesson. The silence pressed against his chest like water. He let himself feel it, the sharp edge of public humiliation, the particular sting of being dismissed by someone who knew nothing about him. He didn't believe in pretending things didn't hurt. Pain acknowledged was pain processed. He thought of his grandmother's voice, the way she used to say his name when he was angry about something. "Terence, baby. Let your work speak. Don't waste breath on folks who got their ears closed." She'd been a teacher for 40 years in underfunded schools, wearing the same professional wardrobe season after season, pouring her own money into classroom supplies. Students mocked her too, for her outdated references, her refusal to curve grades, her insistence that they could do better than they believed. She never flinched. He opened his laptop, the screen glowing pale blue in the afternoon light. His email inbox showed 47 unread messages, 3 from Forbes, following up on the profile they'd published last week, 5 from venture capitalists wanting meetings, 12 from journalists requesting interviews about the app that was quietly revolutionizing microfinance for communities banks had abandoned. 1 from his accountant, subject line Q4 earnings. "You need to see this." He closed the laptop without reading any of them, not yet. Not here. This wasn't the place for that conversation. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, his co-founder. "Yo, you see this video? Some kid at your school. Want me to handle it?" Terence typed back, "Let it go. They'll figure it out." Marcus replied immediately, "Your patience is unnatural, man. I'd have flames coming out." Terence smiled, pocketed his phone. The thing Madison Hart didn't understand, the thing none of them understood yet, was that he'd chosen this. Every morning he woke up in a penthouse in the financial district that he'd purchased cash. He walked past the BMW sitting in his private parking space. He took the bus to Ashford Academy, wearing his teaching rotation wardrobe, carrying lessons in a messenger bag his grandmother had given him before she died. He did this because teaching was the work that mattered. The app, the money, the Forbes profile, those were tools. This room, these students, this daily practice of showing up for people who didn't know they needed him yet, this was purpose. And Madison Hart, with her casual cruelty and her father's money insulating her from consequence, needed this lesson more than most. He just had to wait for her to be ready to learn it. Terence gathered his materials, erased the whiteboard, straightened the desks students had left askew. He moved through the empty classroom like a meditation, restoring order. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted golden across Ashford's perfect lawns. Students laughed in the distance. The world continued, indifferent to small humiliations. He walked out of the classroom, locked the door behind him, and headed toward the bus stop 2 blocks away. Some things, he thought, have value you can't see yet. Give it time. 3 years earlier, Terence Cole had sat in a cramped studio apartment in Oakland, coding until his eyes burned, and dawn light crept through windows he'd forgotten to cover with curtains. His grandmother sat in the corner chair, the only good piece of furniture in the place, knitting something formless, her fingers never still. She'd moved in 6 months prior when the cancer diagnosis came. Terence had dropped out of his master's program at Stanford, had taken a part-time teaching job at a charter school, and spent every other waking hour building something that had lived in his mind since he was 15. Growing up in South Memphis, watching predatory lenders destroy his neighbors. "Baby, you need sleep," his grandmother said, not looking up from her needles. Almost done with this module. His fingers flew across the keyboard, writing code that would eventually route capital to communities banks considered too risky. Microloans for small businesses, emergency funds for families, one broken transmission away from homelessness. Financial literacy tools that didn't condescend. He called it Bridge Fund. The algorithm identified credit-worthy borrowers banks ignored, matched them with impact investors, processed loans in 48 hours. It was elegant, revolutionary, built from grief and anger and intimate knowledge of what it meant to watch your community bleed from 1,000 small cuts. "You still planning to teach when this thing takes off?" his grandmother asked. Terence stopped typing, turned to look at her. She was 73, skin like polished wood, eyes that missed nothing. She'd taught elementary school for 40 years, shaping hundreds of children with a salary that barely covered rent. He'd grown up watching her buy school supplies with grocery money, staying late to tutor kids whose parents worked 3 jobs. "That's the only reason I'm building it," he said, "so I can teach without worrying about keeping lights on." She smiled, slow and knowing. "You got my stubbornness. World's gonna have opinions about what you should do with money. You remember, you decide what matters." She died 4 months later, quietly, in the hospital room, where Terence held her hand and promised to finish both the app and the master's degree. She made him promise one more thing: teach, baby. That's how we change things, one mind at a time. 2 weeks after her funeral, Bridge Fund secured $2 million in seed funding. Within a year, they'd processed $50 million in loans with a 94% repayment rate, higher than traditional banks. Venture capitalists circled. Goldman Sachs made an acquisition offer. Forbes called requesting an interview. Terence said no to everything except Forbes. He needed people to see that wealth could be built with purpose, that success didn't require abandoning the communities that raised you. Then he applied to teach at Ashford Academy. His co-founder Marcus thought he'd lost his mind. "We're about to scale this thing nationally. You want to teach rich kids economics. That's what you're doing with your Stanford degree. Those rich kids," Terence said quietly, "are going to inherit the world. They're going to sit on boards, run companies, make policy decisions. If nobody teaches them to see beyond their zip code, nothing changes." Grandmother knew that. That's why she stayed in schools that broke her heart. So he took the job, moved into the penthouse but kept the bus pass, wore the teaching wardrobe his grandmother had helped him assemble. 3 good shirts, 2 pairs of slacks, 1 blazer for parent conferences. Let his wealth sit in accounts untouched, waiting. The students at Ashford looked at him and saw failure. Saw someone who couldn't afford better. Someone below them. They didn't see the strategy, the patient dismantling of their assumptions, the slow work of teaching empathy to people raised in fortresses of privilege. When Madison Hart mocked his clothes, he heard his grandmother's voice. "Let your work speak, baby. Some folks need to see the crown before they respect the king. But you wear it for you, not them." He was wearing it. They just couldn't see the frequency yet. Bridge Fund was about to announce Series B funding. $25 million, valuation north of $150 million. Forbes wanted a follow-up profile for their 30 under 30 education disruptors issue. The press would come. The visibility would increase. And Madison Hart, with her phones and her cruelty and her complete certainty that appearance meant everything, was about to learn the hardest lesson of her privileged life, that patience outlasts performance. That value isn't worn, it's woven into how you move through the world, that some teachers wait years to deliver the most important lesson, and that lesson would save her soon. Whether she wanted it or not, Emma Rodriguez couldn't sleep. It was Tuesday night, 36 hours after the classroom incident, and Madison's video had reached 40,000 views. It was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter threads about entitled kids and disrespected teachers. Some comments defended Madison. Most didn't. Emma lay in her bedroom, scrolling through her phone in the dark, feeling vaguely sick. She'd laughed in class. Not loudly, but enough. Enough to be complicit. Enough that when she closed her eyes, she saw Mr. Cole's face, that patient, knowing look, and felt ashamed of something she couldn't name. Her algorithm kept serving her content about teachers. Feel-good stories, exposés about low salaries. Then at 11:47 p.m. a video popped up. Teachers with secret lives you won't believe. She almost scrolled past, but the thumbnail showed a classroom. She tapped it. The TikTok was chaotic. Fast cuts, dramatic music, rapid-fire information. Thread about teachers who are secretly loaded. A teacher who owned rental properties. Another who'd sold a tech startup. A third who was a best-selling author under a pen name. Then, buried in the comments, someone wrote, "Anyone go to Ashford Academy? Pretty sure your economics teacher is one of these." Emma sat up in bed, heart suddenly loud in her chest. She clicked the username, I Tech Truth Daily, some startup news account. Scrolled through their posts. Found one from 6 days ago. A blurry photo from a tech conference, a panel of young entrepreneurs. The caption, "These founders are changing finance." Swipe to see who rejected Goldman Sachs. She swiped. The third photo showed a man in a tailored suit, standing at a podium, confident smile, speaking to a room of hundreds. The quality was poor, shot from the audience, but Emma zoomed in, the face, the bone structure, the eyes. Her breath caught. It looked like Mr. Cole, but it couldn't be. Mr. Cole took the bus. Mr. Cole wore the same 3 shirts. Mr. Cole was... She screenshotted the image, opened it in her photos, zoomed until the pixels distorted. Was she seeing what she wanted to see? Was this wishful thinking born from guilt? She went to the comments. Someone had tagged him. A Terence Cole official, killing it as always. Emma's hands shook as she typed the username into Instagram's search bar. The account was private. The profile photo showed a silhouette against a city skyline. The bio read, "Teaching, Building, Believing, Bridge Fund co-founder." Bridge Fund. She'd never heard of it. She switched to Google, typed with trembling fingers, "Bridge Fund App Finance." The results loaded Forbes, TechCrunch, Bloomberg, Business Insider. Bridge Fund raises $25 million Series B to expand microfinance revolution. How? 2 Stanford dropouts are disrupting community. Banking. Meet Terrence Cole, the teacher who's also a millionaire tech founder. Emma clicked the Forbes article, published 3 weeks ago. The page loaded slowly, image first. A professional photo of a man in a sharp navy suit, standing in front of a city skyline, arms crossed, radiating quiet power. Mr. Cole. Unmistakably, undeniably Mr. Cole. She read with growing horror and fascination. At 28, Terrence Cole splits his time between running a microfinance startup valued at $150 million and teaching economics at an elite private academy in the Bay Area. The teaching isn't a side gig, Cole explains. It's the point. These students will inherit systems. If they don't understand how those systems exclude people, nothing changes. Emma kept reading, absorbing facts that rewrote everything. Stanford graduate. $2 million in seed funding. App that had processed over $200 million in community loans. Turned down acquisition offers. Chose teaching as his primary identity. Cole drives no luxury car and takes public transit to school. My grandmother taught in underfunded schools for 40 years, he says. She showed me that real wealth is in the work, not the wardrobe. Emma's vision blurred. The article went on. Awards, recognition, speaking engagements. A photo of him at a White House ceremony for social entrepreneurs. Another of him teaching, standing at a whiteboard in the same blue shirt he'd worn yesterday. She looked at her phone's clock. 12:23 a.m. She opened her messages, started typing to Madison, then stopped. Madison was asleep by now, probably dreaming about her viral video. Emma could wait until morning. Should wait, but her thumb hovered over the send button, trembling. If she was right, if this was real, then everything Madison had said, everything Emma had laughed at, collapsed. Every assumption, every joke, every moment of casual cruelty. He'd stood there and taken it, knowing, letting them reveal themselves. Emma thought about the way Mrs. Chen, the principal, spoke to him with respect. The way other teachers deferred to him in faculty meetings Emma had glimpsed through open doors. The way he moved through Ashford's marble hallways like he belonged anywhere he chose to be, because he did. Because he chose to be there. The full weight of it hit her stomach like a stone. She set her phone down, lay back, stared at her ceiling in the dark. Tomorrow she'd have to tell Madison. Tomorrow, the video would mean something different. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, in the silence of her guilt, Emma understood something that terrified her. If Mr. Cole was right about this, if success truly wasn't visible, then what else were they wrong about? What else had they dismissed, mocked, destroyed, simply because it didn't wear the costume they expected? And if he'd let them humiliate him, knowing the truth would surface eventually, what did that say about his patience? His strategy? His understanding of how privilege collapses under the weight of its own ignorance? Emma closed her eyes. Sleep wouldn't come. She kept seeing his face at the whiteboard, that small, sad smile, like he'd seen this movie before and already knew the ending. Wednesday morning arrived with fog rolling through. Ashford's gates like a warning. Madison walked across the courtyard with her usual confidence, phone in hand, checking the video stats. 42,000 views now. The comments section had become a battlefield, some defending her, others calling her entitled. She ignored the criticism. Hate has always existed, when you had the courage to speak truth. Emma caught up to her near the main entrance, slightly breathless. Madison, wait, I need to talk to you. About the video? I saw the engagement numbers. It's insane. Madison didn't slow down. No, it's... Emma hesitated, glancing around. Students streamed past them, heading to first period. It's about Mr. Cole. I found something last night. Something we need to discuss before class. Madison stopped, turned. What, did he report me? My dad's lawyers will... He's not poor, Madison. Emma's voice came out rushed, urgent. He's the opposite. He's like, really successful. There's a Forbes article. He runs a tech company worth millions. He teaches by choice. For 3 seconds, Madison just stared at her. Then she laughed, short, dismissive. Emma, come on. That's obviously someone else who looks like him. Or it's fake. People make up stuff online constantly. I saw photos from conferences from someone who resembles him. Probably his cooler cousin or something. Madison turned back toward the building. You're being paranoid. If he had money, why would he take the bus? Why would he wear the same clothes? Rich people don't hide wealth. They display it. My dad taught me that. Emma grabbed her arm. Madison, I'm serious. I think we made a mistake. A big one. Madison pulled free, irritated now. The only mistake was him thinking he could teach us about success while looking like a thrift store model. I said what everyone was thinking. That's not a crime. She walked away, leaving Emma standing in the courtyard fog. Holding certainty Madison refused to accept. Economics class began at 10:15. Madison entered with her head high, surrounded by her usual orbit. Mr. Cole stood at the front, writing the day's topic on the board. Perception versus reality in economic status. She had to suppress a smile. Perfect. He was going to make this about the video, try to guilt them. She was ready. He turned as the final bell rang. Good morning. Today we're examining how appearance shapes assumptions about wealth and success. Miss Hart, since you're interested in this topic, perhaps you'd like to start us off with your thoughts on whether visible markers reliably indicate financial status. The room went silent. All eyes on Madison. She felt the weight of the moment, the phones ready to record round 2. She kept her voice calm, almost apologetic. Mr. Cole, look, that thing I said Monday was just, joking around. I didn't mean it as seriously as it came out. I know exactly what you meant, Miss Hart. His voice wasn't angry. That was somehow worse. It was patient, understanding, like he saw through her performance to something she didn't want examined. My father says teachers are... She trailed off, suddenly unsure how to finish the sentence in a way that wouldn't make things worse. I know what your father says, too. Mr. Cole set the marker down, leaned against his desk. I've read his quotes in the business section. He's very articulate about his values. Something in his tone made Madison's stomach tighten. Not mockery, not anger, just observation. Like he'd catalogued her father's entire worldview and found it instructive in the saddest possible way. I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot, Madison tried. There are no wrong feet, Miss Hart. Only revelations that arrive on schedule. He straightened, picked up the lesson plan. Everyone take out your notebooks. We're going to discuss why people perform wealth, why others hide it, and what that tells us about the relationship between money and meaning. Madison sat down, feeling off balance. She'd tried to apologize, sort of, and he dismissed it without actually dismissing it. He'd left her feeling smaller without saying anything cruel. Emma caught her eye from across the room, mouthed, I told you, but Madison shook her head. This proved nothing. He was just good at maintaining dignity. Teachers had training for that. The class proceeded normally. Mr. Cole taught brilliantly, as always weaving statistics with philosophy, making economics feel like a moral examination rather than a math exercise. He called on students evenly, never singling Madison out again. When the bell rang, he said simply, Enjoy your week, everyone. Remember, value reveals itself eventually. Patience is just waiting for the right angle of light. Madison left feeling unsettled in a way she couldn't name, like she'd won a battle but miscalculated the war Saturday afternoon. Madison needed her father's car keys. Malcolm Hart's study occupied the west wing of their house, a room designed to intimidate, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, and a mahogany desk the size of a dining table. Madison rarely entered without invitation, but her father was at a golf meeting, and her own car was in the shop. She pushed open the heavy door. Afternoon light slanted through tall windows, illuminating dust motes like gold confetti. The keys would be in his desk drawer. He kept spares of everything organized with obsessive precision. She crossed the Persian rug, pulled open the top drawer. That's when she saw the magazine. It sat face up on his desk, like he'd been reading it over morning coffee. Forbes, the newest issue. A professional photo dominated the cover. Young black man in a navy suit, arms crossed confidently, city skyline behind him. The headline ran across the top in bold letters, 30 under 30, the teacher disrupting finance. Madison froze. The face staring back at her was impossible. It violated every assumption she'd built. It rewrote reality in a way that made her previous reality feel like a child's drawing. Mr. Cole. Unmistakably. Undeniably. Wearing a suit that probably cost more than her entire closet. Looking like power incarnate. Looking like exactly what she'd mocked him for not being. Her hands moved without conscious thought, picking up the magazine. The cover was glossy under her fingers. Real, physical, undeniable. She opened to the feature article, and her world collapsed sentence by sentence. At 28, Terence Cole has built Bridge Fund into a $150 million microfinance empire and teaches high school economics full-time. The teaching isn't secondary, Cole insists. It's the point. These students will inherit our systems. If nobody teaches them to see beyond their privilege, those systems will never change. Madison's breath came shallow. She kept reading. Cole's personal wealth is estimated north of $15 million. He's turned down acquisition offers from Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, and 3 major banks. Money was never the goal, he explains. My grandmother taught in public schools for 40 years. She showed me that real change happens in classrooms, not boardrooms. There was a photo of him teaching, standing at a whiteboard, wearing the same blue shirt Madison had mocked. The caption, Cole at Ashford Academy, where he teaches economics to students whose families represent the very wealth structures his app disrupts. Madison's legs felt unstable. She sat down in her father's leather chair. Magazines spread across the desk. More photos. Mr. Cole at a tech conference, shaking hands with the Secretary of Commerce. Mr. Cole at a speaking engagement. 100-person audience hanging on his words. Mr. Cole receiving an award for social entrepreneurship, and there, in the sidebar, his stats Stanford graduate, 2 years to build a company from nothing to nationwide impact. 48 speaking engagements last year. Featured in Time, Bloomberg, TechCrunch. When asked why he chooses to teach rather than focus full-time on Bridge Fund, Cole's answer is immediate. Because teaching is how you change minds. Money can redistribute resources, but education redistributes power. And power redistribution is the only revolution that lasts. Madison's phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. The video had reached 50,000 views. Someone had tagged Ashford Academy's official account again. Her stomach turned over. She clicked through to the comments, seeing them now through different eyes. Imagine mocking someone this accomplished. Rich kids really think money. Fair's the only metric. This is what privilege does, makes you blind to actual greatness. Might that teacher probably makes more in a month than her dad makes? In a year, and she has no idea. The room tilted. Madison set the phone down, looked back at the magazine. At Mr. Cole's face, confident, accomplished, knowing he'd known. When she held up that coffee cup, when she questioned his credibility, when she mocked his clothes and his bus pass and his entire existence, he'd known exactly who he was, and he'd let her reveal exactly who she was. The full weight of it crashed over her like cold water. He hadn't defended himself because he didn't need to. He'd been teaching her all along, not about economics, but about the gap between appearance and truth, about the danger of assumptions, about the specific blindness wealth creates, and she'd failed the test spectacularly, publicly, permanently. Madison's hands trembled as she picked up the magazine again, staring at the cover, at the man she'd tried to humiliate, at the evidence of everything she'd gotten catastrophically wrong. Her phone kept buzzing. More comments, more shares. The video spreading like wildfire through a forest that was her reputation. She thought about Monday's class, about his patience, about the way he'd said, "Success isn't always visible." Miss Hart, he'd tried to tell her gently, carefully, and she'd laughed in his face. Madison sat in her father's study, surrounded by evidence of one man's wealth, holding evidence of another man's wisdom, and felt the first true shame of her privileged life. Madison sat on her bedroom floor at 11 p.m., still wearing the clothes from earlier. Magazines spread across her lap like evidence at a crime scene. She'd read the entire article 4 times, memorized sections, absorbed every detail about the app, how it worked, who it helped, why it mattered. Read about his grandmother, the 40-year teaching career. The values passed down like heirlooms. There was a quote that kept circling her mind. "Cole teaches at Ashford Academy specifically because of its affluent student body. These kids will sit on boards, run companies, shape policy," he explains. "If nobody challenges their assumptions early, they'll spend their power entrenching inequality rather than dismantling it." She was the example, the case study, the reason he'd taken the job. Her phone sat next to her, screen dark, but she couldn't stop thinking about what it contained. The video had hit 60,000 views. Students from other schools were sharing it. Someone had made a reaction compilation. Another person had started a thread. "Madison Hart needs to apologize." But worse than the strangers were her own classmates. The group chat had gone eerily quiet after Emma shared the Forbes link. No laughing emojis, no supportive comments. Just silence that felt like judgment. She'd texted Tyler, "Did you see the article?" His response came 2 hours later. "Yeah, that's crazy." Anyway, busy RN Jordan hadn't responded at all. Even Emma, who'd tried to warn her, seemed distant. Madison hugged her knees to her chest. The house was quiet, her parents asleep, household staff gone for the night. She sat in the expensive silence of privilege, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt. She kept replaying the classroom moment, the way she'd held up that coffee cup, the way her voice had cut through the room, designed for maximum humiliation, the way everyone had laughed, because she'd given them permission, because her cruelty had made theirs acceptable, and Mr. Cole had just absorbed it, turned back to the board, continued teaching, not because he was weak, because he was patient, because he was operating on a timeline she couldn't see. Madison opened her laptop, typed his name into Google. The search results went on for pages. Interview after interview, profile after profile, videos of him speaking at conferences, commanding rooms full of people twice his age, explaining complex economic concepts with the same clarity he used in their classroom. There was a TED Talk from 2 years ago, 3.2 million views. She clicked it. He stood on the red circle in jeans and a blazer, no notes, speaking about how banks systematically excluded entire communities and how technology could route capital to credit-worthy people trapped outside traditional systems. His voice carried the same patient authority she heard every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. The comments beneath the video praised his brilliance, his vision, his impact, and she'd treated him like he was nothing. Madison's vision blurred. She closed the laptop, lay back on the plush carpet her parents had installed during last year's renovation. Her room was the size of most apartments, walk-in closet, private bathroom, sitting area. Every material comfort, every possible advantage, and it had made her blind, cruel, small. She thought about her father's voice at dinner tables, pontificating about success and weakness, about winners and losers, about how the world separated people who mattered from people who didn't. She'd absorbed those lessons like osmosis, never questioning whether the man teaching them actually understood the world. Now she wondered, did her father know? Had he read that Forbes issue? Did he recognize his daughter's teacher in those pages? And if he did, would he be proud of her video or ashamed? Madison's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should delete that video. It's not a good look. Then another. My sister goes to your school. She says Mr. Cole is the best teacher there. You messed up. And another. Rich kids really are clueless, huh? She turned the phone face down, but couldn't stop the messages from arriving. The internet had found her. The judgment was rolling in. She picked up the Forbes magazine again. Her father's copy, borrowed without permission, now wrinkled from handling. Mr. Cole's face looked back at her with that confident smile. Not arrogant, just certain. Comfortable in his skin in a way she'd never been, despite having every advantage. The room felt too large suddenly, too empty, too much space for one person who'd accomplished so little beyond being born into the right family. Madison closed her eyes and whispered into the expensive silence, "I'm sorry." But apologies to empty rooms changed nothing. The video was still out there. The damage was still done. And Monday morning would arrive eventually, bringing her back to his classroom, back to facing the man she'd tried to humiliate, back to sitting in the wreckage of her own arrogance. She didn't sleep that night, just lay there in the dark, holding the magazine like a mirror, finally seeing what he'd been trying to show her all along. Monday morning felt different. Madison walked through Ashford's gates with her head down, no phone in hand, no entourage orbiting her. She'd disabled comments on the video Sunday night, though she hadn't deleted it. Some part of her felt like deleting it would be erasure, cowardice, proof she couldn't face what she'd done. The courtyard hummed with different energy. Students glanced at her, whispered, looked away when she made eye contact. She'd gone from powerful to pitied in 72 hours. Emma found her near the lockers. "Hey, you okay?" "Does it matter?" Madison kept her voice flat. "The whole school knows now, about Mr. Cole, about the Forbes thing. Someone printed copies and left them in the library." Emma hesitated. "Principal Chen mentioned it in morning announcements. Called him one of our most accomplished faculty members." Madison closed her locker harder than necessary. "Great, so everyone knows I'm an idiot." "You're not," Emma started, then stopped, because maybe Madison was. Maybe they all were first period. Economics. Madison entered the classroom like walking to execution. Every desk felt like a witness stand. She took her usual seat, third row center, but it felt different now, exposed, vulnerable. Mr. Cole stood at the front, writing on the board as always. He wore the same blue shirt, took the same bus, carried the same messenger bag. Nothing about him had changed. Everything about how she saw him had changed. The bell rang. He turned to face them. "Good morning. Today's topic, why we perform." He underlined the words on the board. "We'll examine the psychology of display, why some people advertise their success, why others hide it, and what both choices reveal about our relationship with validation." Madison's throat felt tight. Was this directed at her? Or was this always the plan? He continued, voice steady. "Consider this scenario. A person has significant wealth but chooses to live modestly. What motivations might drive that choice? Miss Rodriguez, your thoughts?" Emma sat up straighter. "Maybe they don't want to be judged for their money, or treated differently." "Good. What else?" Tyler raised his hand tentatively. "Maybe they think displaying wealth is tacky, or they're trying to stay grounded." "Excellent." Mr. Cole wrote both answers on the board. "Now flip it. A person has moderate means, but displays every symbol of wealth they can afford. Why?" Jordan spoke up without raising his hand. "Insecurity? Trying to prove something." "To whom?" Mr. Cole's question hung in the air. "To everyone else?" Jordan sounded uncertain. "Or to themselves." Mr. Cole set the marker down, leaned against his desk in his characteristic posture. "We perform for external audiences, but also internal ones. Sometimes the person we're trying to convince of our worth is the face in the mirror." Madison felt her cheeks burn. Every word landed like he was reading her diary aloud. "Here's the uncomfortable truth," Mr. Cole continued. In a society that equates visible consumption with success, choosing invisibility becomes its own kind of power. It's a refusal to play a rigged game. It's saying, my worth isn't contingent on your recognition. The classroom was silent. Real silence. Thinking silence, that's privilege too, by the way, he added. The privilege to opt out of performance. To not need external validation, because you're secure in internal validation. But it's a different kind of privilege than we usually discuss. He moved to the board, drew a diagram, 2 overlapping circles. Economic privilege versus philosophical privilege. You can have one without the other. You can have both, or neither. The question is, which one actually makes you free? Madison stared at the diagram, seeing herself in it. She'd had economic privilege her entire life, but philosophical privilege? The freedom to define her own worth independent of others' recognition? She'd never had that. She'd been trapped in performance her entire life, measuring herself by her father's metrics, her peers' reactions, the world's approval. Mr. Cole had both, and he'd chosen to exercise the philosophical kind while concealing the economic kind. As a lesson, the rest of class passed in a haze. Madison took notes mechanically, but she was really just thinking, processing, rearranging her internal architecture. When the bell rang, everyone packed up quickly. Madison moved slowly, watching Mr. Cole erase the board, straighten papers on his desk. The same routine, the same deliberate movements. She waited until the room emptied, then approached his desk, heart hammering. He looked up. Miss Hart, her prepared speech evaporated. I saw the Forbes article this weekend in my dad's office. He set down the eraser. And I need to apologize for what I said. For the video, she gestured helplessly. Everything. He studied her for a long moment. Not unkindly, but not easily either. You don't need my forgiveness to know your worth, Miss Hart. But you might need to give yourself permission to see people clearly, without the filter your privilege provides. I don't know how, she admitted, voice barely above whisper. Start by asking better questions. Not what do they have, but what do they know. Not what do they display, but what do they choose. Not do they matter to my world, but what worlds exist beyond mine. He picked up his messenger bag. Those questions will make you uncomfortable. That discomfort is called growth. Madison nodded, feeling tears threaten. I deleted the comments. I should delete the video. That's your choice. He walked toward the door, then paused. But Miss Hart? The video isn't the problem. It's documentation of the problem. The real work is fixing what created it. He left her standing in the empty classroom, words echoing in the silence. Outside, she could hear students in the hallway, their voices carrying through walls. Normal life. Normal Monday. But she felt fundamentally altered, like she'd been taking a test her entire life, and just realized she'd been filling out the wrong form. Emma appeared in the doorway. Ready for lunch? Madison looked at her friend, really looked. Do you think we're good people? Emma blinked. What? I'm serious. Do you think we're good? Or just lucky? And if it's just luck, what are we supposed to do with it? Emma came inside, closed the door behind her. I think we're learning. Isn't that the point of school? Madison picked up her bag. I thought the point was getting grades good enough to get into good colleges, to get good jobs, to make good money. That's what my dad always said. Maybe your dad's test is different than Mr. Cole's test. They stood there in the empty classroom. 2 wealthy girls raised in bubbles, feeling the bubble walls grow thin and permeable for the first time. I want to understand, Madison said finally, how he sees the world, what he knows that we don't. Then pay attention, Emma said simply. He's been teaching us all along. We just weren't listening. The assembly was scheduled for Friday afternoon, a special presentation Principal Chen had announced Wednesday morning with unusual excitement. A wonderful opportunity, she'd called it, a celebration of educational excellence. Madison sat in the auditorium third row back, surrounded by the entire student body. The room hummed with restless energy. Students who'd rather be starting their weekend early, faculty who looked genuinely interested, and overhead lights that felt too bright. The principal took the stage, beaming. "We have something special today. A documentary crew has been filming a series about innovative educators across America. They've chosen to feature one of our own faculty members, someone who embodies excellence in education and proves that teaching is a calling that attracts our brightest minds." Madison's stomach tightened. She knew, of course she knew. "Please welcome our economics teacher, Mr. Terence Cole, and the team from PBS." Polite applause. Mr. Cole walked onto the stage in his teaching uniform, blue shirt, khakis, messenger bag. He looked exactly the same as he did every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But the context had changed. The frame had shifted. The lights dimmed. A screen descended behind the stage. The documentary segment began with footage of Mr. Cole teaching. Their actual classroom, filmed weeks ago, apparently. Madison watched herself in the background of one shot, taking notes, unaware she was being documented. Then the narrator's voice, smooth and professional. Terence Cole could work anywhere. Goldman Sachs tried to recruit him. Silicon Valley offered board positions. But this Stanford graduate chose a different path. Cut to Mr. Cole at a tech conference, commanding a stage. Mr. Cole shaking hands with the Secretary of Commerce. Mr. Cole accepting an award from the National Association of Social Entrepreneurs. The auditorium went silent. Not restless teenager silence. Shocked silence. The narrator continued. Cole co-founded Bridge Fund, a microfinance app that's processed over $200 million in loans to underserved communities. His personal net worth is estimated at $15 million. And yet 5 days a week he teaches high school economics. Cut to interview footage. Mr. Cole sitting in what looked like a penthouse apartment, city views through floor-to-ceiling windows. "My grandmother taught for 40 years in underfunded schools," he said to the camera. "She showed me that real change happens in classrooms. Money can redistribute resources temporarily, but education redistributes power permanently." Madison felt every eye in the auditorium on her. She'd gone viral mocking this man. Everyone knew. Everyone had seen. The video continued. Testimonials from people Bridge Fund had helped. A single mother who'd opened a bakery. The mechanic who'd expanded his shop. A teacher who'd bought supplies for her classroom. Their voices overlapped. "He changed my life. He gave me a chance. He saw me when banks looked away." Then footage of Mr. Cole teaching their class. The camera captured his patience, his brilliance, the way he broke down complex concepts. A student testimonial, not from Ashford, from his previous school. "Mr. Cole taught me that success isn't about what you take from the world. It's about what you give back." The documentary segment ended with Mr. Cole's final words to camera. "I teach at Ashford specifically because these students will inherit the world's systems. If nobody teaches them empathy, critical thinking, and the responsibility that comes with privilege, those systems will never evolve. These kids are smart. They just need someone to ask them better questions." The screen went dark. Lights came up. The auditorium exploded in applause. Not polite assembly clapping. Real sustained applause. Students stood. Faculty stood. Even Principal Chen had tears in her eyes. Madison sat frozen in her seat, unable to stand, unable to clap, unable to do anything but feel the full weight of her mistake, crushing her chest. Mr. Cole stood on stage, humble and gracious, accepting the recognition with the same quiet dignity he brought to everything. He didn't look at Madison specifically. Didn't need to. The contrast was its own condemnation. The principal returned to the microphone. "We are so fortunate to have Mr. Cole on our faculty. His commitment to education, his innovative work in social entrepreneurship, his belief in our students, it's truly extraordinary." More applause. Then the principal added, "I also want to acknowledge that sometimes we don't recognize excellence until it's pointed out to us. That's a lesson for all of us, faculty and students alike, about looking beyond surface markers to see real value." That was directed at Madison. Everyone knew it. The assembly ended. Students filed out, buzzing with excitement. Madison heard fragments of conversation. "Did you know he was that rich? Why would he teach here if he's a millionaire? Imagine mocking him." That last one trailed off when the speaker noticed Madison nearby. She waited until the auditorium mostly emptied, then made her way to the stage. Mr. Cole was talking with the documentary crew, laughing at something the director said. He looked relaxed, happy, in his element. Madison approached slowly, waited for a pause in conversation. He noticed her, excused himself from the crew. "Miss Hart, she'd rehearsed this, planned it. But now words felt inadequate. I was wrong. About everything. And I'm sorry. Really deeply sorry." He studied her face. "I appreciate that. But Miss Hart, I don't need your apology to know my worth. I never did, I know. But I need to give it. For me," her voice cracked, "I need you to know that I understand now. What you were teaching us. What I was too blind to see. And what was I teaching you?" Madison took a breath. "That value isn't visible. That assumptions are dangerous. That privilege makes you blind, unless you actively work against that blindness. That real success isn't about what you display. It's about what you choose to do with what you have." He nodded slowly. "That's a start, Miss Hart. Now comes the harder work, living like you believe it. How do I do that? Ask better questions. Make different choices. Use your privilege to amplify voices instead of silencing them. Recognize that your worldview is one among many, not the definitive version of reality." He picked up his messenger bag. "And maybe, just maybe, stop measuring people by their clothes and their transportation." Madison felt tears spill over. "I deleted the video. I posted an apology. But it doesn't feel like enough." "It's not," he said gently but firmly. "Apologies are words. Change is action. Show me a year from now who you decided to become after this. That's the apology that matters." He walked past her, heading toward the exit, then paused, turned back. "Miss Hart, for what it's worth, you had the courage to approach me after that assembly. A lot of people in your position would have just avoided me for the rest of the year. Growth starts with discomfort. You're uncomfortable. That's good. Sit with it. Learn from it." Then he was gone, leaving Madison standing alone on the empty stage, surrounded by evidence of everything she'd misunderstood, holding the first real lesson of her privileged life. 3 weeks passed. Madison changed slowly in ways both obvious and invisible. She deleted her social media temporarily, not as punishment, but to break the habit of performing for audiences. She started arriving early to Mr. Cole's class, sitting in the front row instead of third-row center, asking genuine questions instead of performing intellectual superiority. She noticed things she'd never noticed before. The way Mr. Cole treated the janitors with respect, learning their names, asking about their families. The way he stayed late to help students who struggled, never making them feel stupid for not understanding immediately. The way he moved through Ashford's marble halls with quiet confidence, not because he was proving anything, but because he knew his worth wasn't contingent on anyone's recognition. She also noticed her father differently. At dinner one evening, Malcolm Hart pontificated about lazy people who want handouts, and Madison felt something crack in her chest. She heard his words through Mr. Cole's framework, saw the assumption, the privilege, the willful blindness. "Dad," she said quietly, interrupting his monologue, "what if they're not lazy? What if the system is designed to exclude them?" Her father stared at her. "Where is this coming from?" "My economics teacher. He runs a microfinance company that proves credit-worthy people get excluded from traditional banking because of zip codes and bias, not merit. Your teacher?" Her father laughed. The one who takes the bus? The one who's worth $15 million and chooses to teach because he believes education redistributes power. Madison met her father's eyes. He was in Forbes. You had the issue on your desk. The dinner table went silent. Her mother looked between them, confused. Her father's expression shifted. Surprise, then recognition, then something that might have been shame. That was your teacher? He asked finally. That's my teacher. They finished dinner without speaking, but something had shifted. A small crack in the foundation of assumptions Madison had inherited like genetic code. At school, she made different choices. When Tyler made a dismissive comment about a scholarship student, Madison called him out. When Emma suggested skipping class to go shopping, Madison said no. She actually wanted to hear Mr. Cole's lesson on wealth inequality. Her friend group changed. Some people drifted away, uncomfortable with her newfound consciousness. Others, like Emma, leaned in, curious about the transformation. One afternoon, Madison stayed after class. Mr. Cole was erasing the board, humming something under his breath. Mr. Cole, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you let me humiliate you? Why didn't you just tell everyone who you were from the beginning? He set down the eraser, turned to face her. Because telling isn't teaching, Miss Hart. You needed to reveal yourself to yourself. That video, that wasn't about me. It was about you. Your assumptions, your values, your understanding of the world. If I'd stopped you, you would have missed the most important lesson, which is that you're capable of cruelty when you feel superior, and you're capable of growth when you feel humbled. Both are true. The question is, which one do you choose to cultivate? Madison nodded slowly. I wrote that essay you assigned, the one about value. I'd like you to read it. I read all my students' essays. No, I mean, really read it. Not just grade it. I'm trying to understand something. And I think writing it out helps, but I need to. So if I'm getting closer to truth or just performing again. He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him directed at her. Bring it to office hours tomorrow. We'll discuss it. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Growth is uncomfortable. You're just beginning. That evening, Madison sat in her oversized bedroom writing in a journal she'd started keeping. She wrote about privilege, about blindness, about the difference between performing goodness and becoming good. She wrote about her father's values and Mr. Cole's values and the tension between them. She wrote, I used to think success was visible. I used to think if you couldn't see someone's accomplishments, they didn't exist. I used to think the world was simple. Winners and losers, valuable and worthless, people who mattered and people who didn't. Mr. Cole taught me that the world is complex. That value isn't worn. That the quietest people often carry the loudest truths. That real power is choosing where to invest your energy, not advertising how much energy you have. I humiliated him because I needed to believe I was superior, and he let me, because he knew eventually I'd see the truth. And the truth would teach me more than any defense he could have offered. I don't know who I'm becoming, but I know I'm not who I was 3 weeks ago. And that feels like the beginning of something true. She closed the journal, looked out her bedroom window at Ashford's campus glowing in the distance. Monday would come. Mr. Cole would be there, wearing one of his 3 shirts, carrying lessons in a messenger bag, teaching students who finally understood what a gift his presence was. And Madison would be there too, front row, notebook open, ready to learn, not performing growth, actually growing. The difference, she was learning, was everything. 6 months later, Terence Cole stood at his classroom window after the final bell, watching students stream toward the parking lot in their expensive cars. The spring afternoon painted everything golden, trees budding, grass impossibly green, privilege displayed in 12 manicured acres. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, Series C closed. 50 minutes. You coming to the celebration dinner? Terence typed back, can't, parent-teacher conferences tonight. Congrats, though, Marcus replied with laughing emojis. You're impossible, man. You know that. Terence smiled, pocketed his phone. Through the window, he watched Madison Hart walk across the courtyard, not surrounded by an entourage anymore, but talking quietly with two scholarship students, gesturing animatedly about something. She'd cut her hair shorter, wore less makeup, carried herself differently. Less performance, more presence. She'd kept coming to office hours all semester, asked real questions, struggled with real discomfort, written essays that revealed genuine thought rather than regurgitated privilege. She'd joined the Social Justice Club, volunteered at his grandmother's old school, started a fundraiser for Bridge Fund that raised $12,000 from Ashford families. She was learning, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. Not all students transformed. Tyler Chen still made dismissive comments. Jordan Bennett still measured worth by visible markers. Some people needed harder lessons, delivered over longer timelines. Terence had patience for that too. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind, the way it always did when he questioned whether teaching mattered. Baby, you won't save everyone. But everyone you reach reaches others. That's how change compounds. He thought about the year, the viral video, the assembly, the slow unwinding of assumptions. It had gone exactly as he'd anticipated. Not because he was prescient, but because he'd seen this pattern before. Privilege confronting its own limitations, cruelty meeting consequence, growth emerging from discomfort. The documentary had aired nationally last month. His inbox exploded with messages. Students from previous years, people Bridge Fund had helped, strangers inspired by the story. But the message that mattered most came from Madison. Subject line simple, thank you. She'd written, "You could have destroyed me. You had every right. Instead, you let me destroy myself, and then taught me how to rebuild. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand how much patience that required, but I'm trying to learn it. Thank you for seeing something in me I didn't see in myself." Terence hadn't responded immediately. Some gratitude needed space to breathe, to settle, to become something more than transaction. Now, watching her through the window, laughing with students she wouldn't have noticed 6 months ago, he felt that particular satisfaction teachers rarely got to experience, witnessing transformation in real time. His phone buzzed again. An email from Principal Chen. Board meeting next week. They want to discuss expanding your program model to other private schools. Interested? He'd think about it. Maybe. There was power in replication, in spreading this methodology to other institutions that needed it. But there was also power in staying present, in deepening roots rather than spreading branches. Either way, he'd choose deliberately. That was the lesson his grandmother had taught him. Not just what you do, but why you do it. Purpose over performance. Impact over image. Legacy over luxury. Terence gathered his materials, erased the whiteboard one final time. The equation from today's lesson still ghosted on the surface. Value down impact x intention. Display. He'd asked students to solve for different variables. What happens when you maximize display? Minimize intention? Multiply impact? Madison had answered perfectly. When display increases and intention decreases, value approaches zero. When impact increases and display decreases, value compounds exponentially. The equation proves that visibility is inversely proportional to genuine worth. She'd gotten it. Finally. Deeply. Terence picked up his worn messenger bag, the same one his grandmother gave him, stitched and repaired multiple times, carrying more meaning than any luxury brand ever could. He walked out of the classroom, through Ashford's marble hallways, past the principal's office where his Forbes cover hung framed on the wall now. He nodded to the security guard, stepped outside into spring sunshine, walked the 2 blocks to the bus stop. A BMW pulled up beside him. Madison rolled down the window. "Mr. Cole, can I give you a ride?" He smiled, kept walking. "I'm good, Miss Hart. Bus gets me where I need to go." "I know," she called after him. "But so does kindness, and I'm trying to practice it more." He paused, turned back, saw genuine offering, not performance. Saw growth, not guilt. All right, he said, walking to the passenger side. But on one condition. What's that? You tell me what you learned today. Not what you think I want to hear. What you actually learned. Madison pulled into traffic, thought for a moment. I learned that the best teachers don't give you answers. They give you better questions. And then they wait, with impossible patience, for you to figure out you've been asking the wrong questions your entire life. Terence settled into the leather seat, looked out at the city passing by. Wealth and struggle pressed together, glass towers and broken streets. The whole complicated world trying to make sense of itself. That's a good start, Miss Hart, he said quietly. Now spend the next decade learning what to do with that knowledge. She drove through the golden afternoon, and for the first time in her life, Madison Hart felt like she might be heading in the right direction. Not because anyone was watching, but because she finally understood that the most important work happens in the quiet spaces where performance ends and purpose begins. Behind them, Ashford Academy glowed in the spring light, marble and glass and manicured perfection, a place where privilege lived and breathed, and occasionally, if teachers were patient enough and students were brave enough, learned to see beyond itself. Terence closed his eyes, let the sun warm his face through the window, his grandmother's voice one final time. Baby, some folks need to see the crown before they respect the king. But you wear it for you, not them. And when they finally see it, that's when the real teaching begins. They'd laughed at her once too, called her old-fashioned, mocked her outdated methods, dismissed her as irrelevant. Now, decades after her death, her grandson was reaching millions through an app built on her principles, teaching hundreds through a calling she'd passed down like scripture. The world had laughed. Then the world listened, and the listening, that soft, difficult work of actually hearing, was where transformation lived. Madison turned onto the highway, heading toward wherever teachers went after school. Terence didn't correct her assumption that he lived nearby. Let her drive. Let her practice kindness. Let her grow in the doing. Some lessons took 6 months. Some took 6 years. Some took a lifetime. But they all started the same way, with someone patient enough to let you fail, wise enough to let you learn, and certain enough in their own worth that your judgment couldn't diminish them. The city stretched ahead, full of people learning and teaching and growing and failing and trying again. Terence opened his eyes, looked at the road ahead. Still so much work to do, still so many minds to reach, still so much purpose to pursue. The bus would have gotten him there fine. But this moment of a student practicing growth, offering kindness, learning to see, this was why he taught, not for the destination, for the journey, for the slow, patient work of helping young people unlearn cruelty and learn compassion, for the impossible, beautiful task of redistributing power through education. One classroom at a time, one student at a time, one lesson at a time, until the world learned to look past surfaces and see souls, until privilege learned humility, until cruelty learned consequence, until the quiet ones were finally heard.